My name is Julius Vaughn. I am 69 years old and I am a retired master carpenter. When my son Anthony told me I was not welcome for Christmas, I smiled. I got in my old pickup truck and I drove away. 2 days later, my son had 25 missed calls and my daughter-in-law was on a hysterical voice message screaming about foreclosure. They thought I had just gone home defeated. They were wrong. I did not drive home. I drove straight to the bank. My 2008 Ford F-150 pickup truck creaked as I pulled it to the curb, parking across the street from a 5,000 square foot brick and stucco monster in Alpharetta, Georgia. It was a 5-bedroom, 6-bathroom house. I knew the exact square footage because I had paid the $300,000 down payment. That was nearly my entire retirement fund, the money I had earned through 45 years of sweatwood splinters under my fingernails and a chronic ache in my lower back that never fully went away. I had done it for Anthony, my only son, and for my granddaughter Zoe. I killed the engine, and the dull ache in my left knee reminded me that I was 69. On the passenger seat beside me, carefully wrapped, was a professional drafting table and a high-end art kit. Zoe had real talent. She had her grandmother's eye, my late wife Cynthia's eye. The gift was heavy, but I wanted to carry it in myself. I pressed the doorbell. It took a long time for anyone to answer. I could hear faint Christmas music playing inside the smooth jazz type that my daughter-in-law Tiffany always had on. The door finally opened. Tiffany stood there, not a welcoming smile, just a blank expression. She was wearing an expensive-looking beige yoga outfit, the kind you wear to the mall, not to the gym. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a perfectly messy bun. "Julius," she said. Her voice had no warmth, just flat acknowledgement. "I wasn't expecting you." "I came to drop off Zoe's gift early," I said, trying to keep my own voice cheerful. "I heard you all were leaving for that ski trip in Colorado." Tiffany did not move from the doorway. She blocked the entrance. "We're busy right now," she said, glancing past me to the street as if she were expecting a more important guest to arrive. I cleared my throat. "It's pretty heavy. If I could just leave it on the porch. I'll have Anthony get it later." The humiliation started to burn low and hot in my stomach. I am Julius Vaughn. I built 2 houses from the foundation up with my own hands before I turned 30. And now I was being told to leave my granddaughter's Christmas gift on the porch like a delivery driver. "I'd like to give it to Zoe myself, Tiffany, if she's home." Tiffany let out a dramatic put-upon sigh. "Fine, whatever." She turned her back and walked away, leaving me to wrestle the heavy door and the large box by myself. I pushed the box into the grand foyer, my boots scraping on the gleaming white oak floors. I paid for these floors, I thought. I helped them pick out the stain. "Anthony," Tiffany yelled up the curved staircase. "Your father is here." The way she said "your father" made it sound like a problem that needed to be handled in irritation. I heard hurried footsteps. Anthony appeared at the top of the stairs. He's 42, wearing a tech company polo shirt and shorts, already looking like he was on vacation. But his face was tight with stress. He always looked stressed when Tiffany was in the room. "Dad, hey, I was gonna call you," he stammered, walking down. "Brought this for Zoe," I said, patting the large box. "Merry Christmas early before you all head to Colorado. I bet Zoe is excited." Anthony glanced over his shoulder. Tiffany was leaning against the wall, inspecting her fingernails. That single look, that quick permission-seeking look from my son to his wife, twisted my gut. When did my son need permission to talk to his own father? Yeah, about that," Anthony started. "Plans changed a little bit," Tiffany scoffed from across the room, a small dry laugh. "Not we. Anthony and I are going to St. Bart's. It's an adults-only trip. Zoe is staying with friends." I froze. St. Bart's, the island for billionaires where a bottle of beer costs $20. Colorado had been a lie, and they were leaving Zoe behind. "St. Bart's?" I asked. "That sounds expensive. What about Zoe?" "She's alone for Christmas." "She's 16, Julius," Tiffany chimed in, her voice sharp. "She'll be fine. She's staying at her friend's house, the Petersons. They have a bigger house than we do." It was a casual, unnecessary insult. I turned back to Anthony, trying to find the son I raised. "But what about Christmas Day? Will you be back? We always have dinner on Christmas Eve. Ever since your mother passed." My voice trailed off. It was our tradition. The one meal a year I truly looked forward to. Anthony rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit he's had since he was a boy. Actually, Dad, about Christmas. He paused, and again his eyes darted to Tiffany. Tiffany rolled her eyes. Oh, for God's sake, Anthony, just tell him. Anthony took a deep breath. Tiffany and we're just having a quiet Christmas this year. Tiffany's parents are flying in, and I just think it's best. Just us this year. The air was sucked out of my lungs. I stood there, a 69-year-old man in his clean work pants, feeling impossibly small in the grand foyer I had financed. Just you, I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. You mean? Anthony could not meet my eyes. He stared at his $300 sneakers. I mean, I'm not expecting you, Dad. It's just better if you do your own thing. Not expecting me. The words hung in the air, cold and sharp as broken glass. Do your own thing, as if I were the maintenance man, not his father. Tiffany stepped forward, putting on a smile. It was a thin, brittle smile that didn't reach her ice-blue eyes. That's right, Julius. My parents are flying in. They'll be using the guest suite. You understand we just don't have enough room. It would be cramped. Not enough room. I looked around the massive foyer, which led into a sprawling living room and a dining room big enough for 20. A 5-bedroom house. 5,000 square feet. Not enough room. Meanwhile, her parents, who I knew for a fact had never contributed a single dime to this mortgage, the same people who had openly scoffed at my blue-collar job at the housewarming party. They were welcome. And then I saw her. Zoe. My granddaughter was standing halfway down the stairs, her knuckles white as she gripped the railing. She was in her pajamas, her face pale with a shame that didn't belong to her. Her eyes. Cynthia's eyes were filled with tears. She had heard every word. Mom, Zoe started, her voice trembling. Grandpa? Zoe, go to your room now. Tiffany snapped, her voice like a whip. This is an adult conversation. Do not interfere. Zoe flinched as if she'd been physically struck. She looked at me one more time, a desperate, apologetic look, before she turned and ran back up the stairs. I heard her bedroom door slam shut. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. Anthony was still studying the pattern on the oak floor. Tiffany turned back to me, the fake smile plastered back on her face. Well, it was good to see you, Julius. Thanks for the gift. Anthony will bring it in later. She walked to the front door and held it open. It was a dismissal. Clear and final. I stood motionless for a beat. The pain in my chest was sharp, a hot stabbing sensation that felt worse than the mild heart attack I'd had 5 years ago. This was betrayal, pure and simple. I looked at my son one last time. Anthony. He half lifted his head, but his eyes were empty. The boy I had taught to ride a bike, the man I had held as we buried his mother, was gone. In his place was a weak, hollow stranger. I nodded. Just a single, slow, deliberate nod. I said nothing. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing how badly they had wounded me. I would not beg for a seat at the table I had paid for. I walked across the threshold and heard the heavy, solid oak door, the exact door I had recommended for its quality, click shut behind me. The sound of the deadbolt sliding into place was like a gunshot. I sat in my truck. I did not start the engine right away. I just sat. The street was quiet. $1-million homes decorated with obscene amounts of Christmas lights. I stared at Anthony's house. My house. The pain did not fade, but something else rose up underneath it. Something cold and hard as steel. It was clarity. Cynthia had been right all along. You spoil him, Julius, she had said, her voice thin on her hospital bed. You love him blind. You can't see what that girl Tiffany is doing to him. That girl only sees dollar signs. I had dismissed it. She loves him, honey, I had told her. Just give them a chance. Regret tasted like bile in the back of my throat. I, Julius Vaughn, 69 years old, had spent my entire life building things for my family, and in less than 3 minutes I had been discarded like a piece of old furniture. Not enough room. Cramped. I looked down at my hands on the steering wheel. The knuckles were swollen with arthritis, the skin calloused and scarred. These hands had worked. These hands had provided. And these hands had just been pushed out the very door they had helped to build. I took one deep, shuddering breath. I inhaled the pain. I exhaled the rage. No, not rage. It was resolve. I turned the key. The F-150's V8 engine rumbled to life, reliable as always. I glanced at the porch where Zoe's gift sat abandoned. Damn, I should have taken it with me. But it didn't matter. That was the smallest loss of the day. I put the truck in drive, but I did not turn right the way to my small apartment. I turned left toward the main road, toward downtown. I drove straight to the main branch of Truist Bank where I've had my accounts for 40 years. I walked into the cool marble lobby. It was 11 a.m., not too busy. I went straight to Brenda Henderson's desk. She was a vice president and she'd handled my money since I was just a young contractor. "Julius," she smiled, standing up. "What a nice surprise. Here to get Zoe's Christmas cash." "Not exactly, Brenda," I said, taking the seat. My voice was even frighteningly calm. "I need you to do a few things for me." The shift in my tone got her attention. She sat up straight, her smile fading into a professional mask. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "I have an automatic mortgage payment. It goes to Wells Fargo for mortgage account number 4409B. The payment is for $2,000 scheduled to go out the day after tomorrow, December 1st. Brenda nodded, typing on her keyboard. "I see it. The payment for the Alpharetta property." "That's the one," I said. "I want that automatic payment stopped, permanently, effective immediately." Brenda looked up, her eyebrows raised. "Permanently, Julius, this is a co-signed mortgage. If that payment is late—" "I know exactly what it is, Brenda," I interrupted, my voice firm. "Cancel it." She stared at me for a long second, saw the iron in my eyes, and knew not to argue. She was a banker. She didn't ask personal questions. She nodded. "All right. The automatic payment for 4409B has been terminated." "Good," I said. "Next." I leaned forward. "I have my IRA with you with a balance of, I believe, around $450,000 and a money market account with about $80,000 more. Yes, they're performing very well. I want the entire balance of both accounts transferred to a different bank, today." This time Brenda was visibly shocked. "Transferred? All of it, Julius? You've been with us for— Is there a problem with our service? Your service is excellent." "Brenda," I said. "But my son Anthony Vaughn also banks here. He's listed as my emergency contact. I want my finances completely separated from anything associated with this branch. I want a clean, fresh start. Somewhere his name isn't in the system." Understanding dawned in Brenda's eyes. She'd seen family money disputes before. "I understand, Julius," she said quietly, her tone all business now. "It will take a few days to liquidate the positions and transfer the funds. Where would you like it to go?" "Citizens Trust Bank," I said. "The historic black-owned bank in Atlanta, the one my own father had used." "A fine choice," she said. "I'll start the paperwork immediately." I stood up. "Thank you, Brenda." I walked out of the bank and into the cold November air. It bit at my face. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like I had just lit a very long fuse. I had done it. I had cut the cord. My $2,000 would not be there. And I knew as surely as I knew the sun would rise that Anthony and Tiffany did not have that $2,000. As I drove to my apartment, my phone was silent. It was still too early. They were still busy dreaming of St. Bart's. I got home, locked my door, and made a pot of strong black coffee. I sat in my old recliner staring out the window. The game was on, and I knew exactly what my next move had to be. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 6 months. "Turner Law Offices," a professional voice answered. "I need to speak to Kendrick," I said. "Tell him it's Julius Vaughn. It's time to review the Vaughn Family Trust." My apartment is small, just 2 bedrooms in a quiet brick building in Decatur. It is clean, it is paid for, and everything in it is mine. When I closed the door, the silence was a relief. It was a warm, familiar silence, not the cold, empty silence of that 5,000-square-foot icebox in Alpharetta. I walked past the kitchen and went straight to my recliner, the old worn-out one that Cynthia always threatened to throw away. I sat down and the reality of what I had just done settled over me. I had canceled the payment. I had started the process of moving $500,000. I had, in effect, declared war on my only child. My gaze drifted to the mantelpiece. There was a photo of Cynthia taken about 10 years ago before she got sick. She was laughing, her eyes crinkling at the corners. She was wearing her favorite gardening hat. Cynthia was the love of my life. She was practical, sharp as a tack, and she never ever minced words. She was the foundation, and I was just the framework built around her. She'd been gone for 7 years now. Cancer. It was fast, and it was brutal, and it took the light out of my world. In those last few months in the quiet of the hospital room, we had talked about everything. Mostly we talked about Anthony. At the time, Anthony had just started getting serious with Tiffany. She was a real estate agent, ambitious, polished, and nothing like the women Anthony had dated before. I was just happy to see him settling down. I was blinded by it. Cynthia was not. "You spoil him, Julius," she had whispered to me one night, her voice thin from the morphine. "You always have. You love him so blind." "He's a good boy, honey," I had said, holding her hand. "He's a good boy," she agreed. "But he's a weak man. And that girl, that Tiffany, she's not weak." She had paused, taking a rattling breath. "You watch her, Julius. You watch her eyes." "What about her eyes?" "She doesn't look at him," Cynthia said, her own eyes closing with effort. "She looks at what he represents. She looks at you. She sees your name, your reputation as a builder. She sees your savings. That girl only sees dollar signs, Julius. She doesn't love our son. She loves what our son can give her." I had dismissed it. I told myself it was the illness talking, the fear of a mother leaving her son. "You're being too hard on her sin," I had told her. "Just give them a chance. He's happy." "He thinks he's happy," she'd countered. "There's a difference. Don't let her run him. Don't let her push you out. Promise me." I had promised. "I'll always look out for him, honey. I promise." I sat there in my recliner 7 years later, and the weight of that broken promise crushed me. I had failed. I had let Tiffany do exactly what Cynthia had predicted. I had let her push me out. I had let her turn my son into a hollow man who stared at his shoes while his wife told his father there was no room for him. The guilt was a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth. I had been a fool. I had been so desperate to keep the peace, so desperate to maintain this illusion of a happy family after Cynthia was gone, that I had financed my own destruction. I had paid for the very house I was just kicked out of. I looked back at Cynthia's picture. "You were right, baby," I whispered to the empty room. "You were right about all of it." But the sadness didn't last. It burned away, leaving something hard and focused in its place. This wasn't just about my hurt feelings. It wasn't just about Christmas. This was about correcting a fundamental wrong. This was about honoring my wife's memory. This was about reclaiming the dignity and the legacy that I had worked my entire life to build. My silence now had a purpose. My apartment was not a lonely place. It was a command center. The phone call to the bank was just the first move. Now it was time for the second. I looked at the clock. It was almost noon. Kendrick Turner would be back from his morning court session. I picked up my phone. I knew the number by heart. It was time to find out just how badly my promise had been broken. It was time to review the Vaughn family trust. "Turner Law Offices," a crisp, professional voice answered on the second ring. "This is Julius Vaughn. I need to speak with Kendrick." "Mr. Turner is in a deposition, sir. Can I take a message?" "You tell him Julius Vaughn called," I said, my voice low and firm. "You tell him it's not an emergency, but it is urgent. And you tell him it's time to review the Vaughn family trust." There was a pause on the other end. The name Vaughn Family Trust had weight. It was a file I imagined that didn't get pulled very often. I'll give him the message immediately, Mr. Vaughn." I hung up. I didn't have to wait long. My phone rang less than 30 minutes later. "Julius." The voice was deep, gravelly, and carried the authority of 50 years in a courtroom. "Kendrick Turner." "Kendrick, you get my message." I did. That's a name I haven't heard in a while. I thought that trust was all settled. "Everything okay, man?" Kendrick and I went way back. We'd played checkers in the park as teenagers long before he went to Howard and I started my apprenticeship. He was the only man I trusted with my money and my legacy, especially after Cynthia passed. "Not exactly Kendrick," I said. "I need to see you. Today." "I'm looking at my calendar, Julius. It's full." "Clear it," I said. It wasn't a request. There was a long sigh on the other end. "My 4 o'clock just canceled. My office. Be there." He hung up. Kendrick's office was on the top floor of an old, respectable brick building downtown. It wasn't like these new money law firms with glass walls and chrome furniture. His office smelled like old books, lemon polish, and strong coffee. The walls were covered in dark wood paneling and framed degrees alongside photos of him with various city mayors, and even one with a young John Lewis. This was an office that signified permanent stability, the exact opposite of the world my son and daughter-in-law lived in. Kendrick stood up when I walked in. He was 70 years old, thin as a rail, impeccably dressed in a three-piece suit, and had a mind like a steel trap. "Julius," he said, shaking my hand. His grip was firm. "You look like hell. Sit down. What's so urgent it couldn't wait?" I sat in the heavy leather chair opposite his desk. I didn't beat around the bush. "Anthony and Tiffany told me I'm not welcome for Christmas." Kendrick leaned back, steepling his fingers. He just looked at me for a moment. "Well, that's a low-down, dirty shame. After everything you've done for that boy." "They said they didn't have room. Said her parents were coming." "Her parents, Kendrick. I remember her parents from the housewarming," Kendrick said with a grimace. "Man looked at me like I was the waiter, so it's a family dispute. It's ugly, it hurts, but why does it involve me? You want me to sue them for bad manners?" "No," I said. "I want to talk about the house. After I left, I went to Truist. I canceled the $2,000 mortgage payment I've been making for them, the one that's due on the 1st. Kendrick's expression changed. The friend disappeared and the lawyer took his place. He leaned forward, all sharp angles and concentration. "Julius, what are you doing? You co-signed that loan. You're on the hook just as much as they are. If that payment defaults, your name is on it. Your credit takes the hit. You're cutting off your own nose to spite your face." This was the moment. This was why I was here. "No, Kendrick," I said slowly. "You and I both know I didn't just co-sign. I'm not that foolish. You made sure of it." A flicker of understanding crossed his face. "Ah." "Pull the file, Kendrick," I said. "The Vaughn Family Trust, the 2018 revision, the one we did right after Cynthia passed." Kendrick swiveled in his chair, not to a computer, but to a massive wall of beige filing cabinets. He pulled a thick folder tied with a red ribbon. He laid it on his desk, the cover thick with dust. "The Vaughn Family Trust," he read. "Remind me what we did," I said. Kendrick opened it, his long fingers navigating the pages. "We created the revocable trust to protect your assets from probate. We put everything in it. This apartment, your retirement accounts, your tool collection, your truck. As of 2018, you personally own nothing. The trust owns it all. You are the sole trustee." "Correct," I said. "Now skip ahead to 2020, when Anthony and Tiffany wanted that house." He flipped a few pages. "Right, the Alpharetta property." He scanned the document. "They didn't qualify for the loan. Their debt-to-income ratio was a joke. The bank wouldn't touch them." "But they wanted it," I said, the bitterness rising again. "Tiffany had to have it." "It's an investment, Dad," Anthony said. "It's the right neighborhood." "And you wanted to help," Kendrick finished. "I wanted to help," I agreed. "But I also remembered what Cynthia said about Tiffany. So I came to you. And what did we decide?" Kendrick looked up from the paper, a slow, thin smile spreading on his face. He finally understood where I was going. "You didn't give them the $300,000, Julius." "No, I damn well did not." "We structured it," Kendrick said, tapping the paper, "as a capital investment. The $300,000 down payment was not a gift from Julius Vaughn. It was an investment from the Vaughn Family Trust. In exchange, the trust took a majority equity position in the property. You are not just a co-signer on the loan, Julius." He leaned in, his voice dropping. "Your trust is a documented legal majority equity partner in that house. You own more of it than they do." The words hung in the air. This was my ace, the one I had hidden for years, hoping I would never have to play it. "So," I said, my own voice steady, "as a partner, I have certain rights, don't I?" "You have all the rights," Kendrick said. "They are minority partners. You are the majority. You just chose not to exercise those rights. You've been acting like a generous father instead of the lead investor." "They called me a financial drain, Kendrick." I said the words feeling like poison on my tongue. "They told me there was no room for me in the house my money bought. Now I want to stop acting like a father. I want to act like an investor." Kendrick closed the folder. What do you want to do, Julius? I've already stopped my $2,000 contribution to the mortgage, but that's not enough. I want to know about their contribution. They are supposed to be paying the other $1,500 a month plus taxes and insurance. I've just been trusting them. Trust, Kendrick scoffed. That's a word for church, not for real estate. I want to see the books, I said. I want to know if they've been making their payments. I want to know the exact balance on that mortgage. I want to know everything. Kendrick nodded, all business now. That is well within your rights as trustee. The house is an asset of the trust. You have a fiduciary duty to protect that asset. You can and should audit it. He picked up a pen and a fresh legal pad. Here's what we do. I will draft a formal inquiry to Wells Fargo's legal department as counsel for the Vaughn Family Trust, the primary equity holder. I will request a full certified payment history for the life of the loan. I will also request the current principal balance and the status of the escrow account for taxes. When? I asked. Now. While you sit here. They will have to comply. We'll have the records by the end of the week. I felt a cold, grim satisfaction settle over me. This was no longer a messy family argument. This was a business transaction. A contract had been breached. I stood up. Thank you, Kendrick. He stood with me, walking me to the door. He put a hand on my shoulder, his lawyer face softening for just a second. You're sure you want to pull this thread, Julius? You start digging into a joint mortgage with people who lie to you. Sometimes you find things you really don't want to see. I looked my old friend in the eye. Find them, I said. Find everything. Cynthia was right about them. It's been 7 years. It's time I finally proved it. The wait for those documents was the longest 3 days of my life. It was the last week of November. The weather had turned bitter cold, but I didn't notice. I stayed in my apartment drinking black coffee, pacing the floor and answering no calls. My phone remained silent. Anthony and Tiffany were, I assumed, too busy packing their expensive luggage for St. Bart's to even notice I existed. They had no idea the first of the month was approaching like a freight train. The call came on a Friday afternoon. It was Kendrick. Julius, he said, and his voice was flat. All the friendly gravel was gone. It was the voice of a lawyer delivering bad news. You need to come down here. Now. They sent the package. What is it? I asked, my hand tightening on the receiver. It's not a conversation for the phone man, he said. Just get here. And Julius, you might want to sit down when you do. The drive downtown was a blur. I parked in the garage across the street and walked through the cold, blowing wind. I felt a strange calm, the kind you feel in the eye of a hurricane. When I walked into Kendrick's office, his secretary, a kind older woman named Maria, just gave me a sad, sympathetic look. She didn't even ask me to wait. She just waved me through. Kendrick wasn't sitting behind his desk. He was standing at the conference table, a long, polished piece of mahogany. Spread across it were a dozen pages of printouts, official-looking documents from Wells Fargo full of numbers and legal text. Julius, thanks for coming, he said. He didn't offer me coffee. He just pointed to the papers. Here it is, the full certified payment history. I walked over my bad knee, aching from the cold. I looked at the columns of dates and numbers. At first it looked fine. I could see my $2,000 payment listed every month. I don't understand, I said. It looks like the payments were made. Oh, the full payment was made, Kendrick said, his voice grim. He slid a different page in front of me. Look closer. Look at the source of the payments, he pointed. Here's your $2,000 in electronic funds transfer from Truist, every month on the dot. Now look here at the other $1,500. Up until 6 months ago, it was a transfer from Anthony's personal checking account. But look at this. June. My eyes followed his finger. The payment from Anthony's account was missing, but the full mortgage was still paid. How? I asked. Kendrick slid a third document onto the table. It was a loan origination document. This Julius, he said, tapping the paper, is a HELOC, a home equity line of credit. They took one out 6 months ago. I felt my blood run cold. I'm a builder. I know what a HELOC is. It's a second mortgage. It's a loan taken out against the equity you have in your house. They borrowed against the house, I whispered. They borrowed against your equity, Julius. Kendrick corrected me, his voice sharp as broken glass. You put down $300,000. They've lived there for 2 years. The market's been good, but they haven't built any significant equity of their own. The only reason the bank gave them this line of credit is because of your initial investment. Your $300,000 was the collateral. I couldn't speak. I just stared at him. For the last 6 months, Kendrick continued, his voice like a hammer striking an anvil. They haven't been paying their share of the mortgage at all. They've been paying it out of the HELOC. They've been borrowing money against your investment to pay their bills. It was a shell game. They weren't just living off me. They were actively, systematically borrowing against my life savings just to maintain their lifestyle. How much? I finally managed to ask. The words felt thick in my mouth. Kendrick didn't answer. He just pushed the final damning piece of paper in front of me. It was the HELOC statement. The line of credit had a limit of $50,000, and the current balance $49,812. They had maxed it out. In 6 months, they had burned through $50,000 of equity that I had built. 50,000, I breathed. I had to grip the edge of the table. The room felt like it was tilting. Kendrick, $50,000. St. Bart's Julius, Kendrick said quietly. That's how you afford St. Bart's when you're not paying your bills. That's how you buy new clothes and lease new cars. I looked at the statement again, and a cold, pure rage unlike anything I had ever felt washed over me. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not weakness. This was not my son being manipulated. This was theft. This was calculated, cold-blooded fraud. They had looked at my generosity, my life's work, my retirement, and had seen nothing but a checking account to be drained. They had invited her parents for Christmas in the house I paid for with money they stole from me and told me there was no room. The humiliation I had felt at their front door was nothing compared to this. This was a deeper, more profound betrayal. This was a dagger in the back. They stole from me, I said, my voice shaking not with sadness but with a sudden terrible clarity. Yes, they did, Kendrick said. They committed loan fraud. They used an asset of the trust as collateral without the trustee's permission. That Julius is a crime. I straightened up. The ache in my knee was gone. The fog in my head was gone. All that was left was a block of ice. And they think. I said that I'm just going to go away, that I'm just going to do my own thing for Christmas like a good quiet old man. They think I'm a fool. The question is, Kendrick said, folding his arms, what do you want to do about it? Because as of December 1st, when your $2,000 doesn't show up and this HELOC is maxed out and frozen, that entire $3,500 mortgage payment is going to default, and the bank will come calling. I looked at Kendrick, my old friend, my lawyer. They don't know I've done that. They're still planning their trip. They're probably sipping champagne right now, laughing at me. Probably, Kendrick agreed. They think I'm a goner, I said. They think I'm a financial drain. Well, this drain is about to back up all over them. I pointed to the papers. This is bad, Kendrick. This is worse than I ever imagined. But you know what? It feels incomplete. $50,000 is a lot of money, but Tiffany, she's greedy, but she's also smart. I feel like there's something else we're missing. Kendrick nodded slowly. I agree. This feels desperate. Taking out a HELOC to pay a mortgage is just kicking the can down the road. People do that when they have a big payday coming or when they're planning to run. We both stood there in the quiet of his office, the damning evidence laid out between us. So what's our next move? Kendrick asked. Our next move, I said, is to find out what they're really planning. They've shown me their books. Now I need to see their cards. I need to get inside that house. I stared at the HELOC statement. The numbers $49,812 burned into my memory. $50,000. It was an abstract number, just digits on a page, until I started to really process what it meant. I am a builder. I have lived my life by numbers. I know what materials cost. I know what labor costs. $50,000. I said, my voice barely a whisper, but the words echoed in the quiet of Kendrick's office. That's a brand new Ford F-150 top of the line. That's a down payment on another rental property. It's more than I made in my first 5 years of work combined. Kendrick nodded, his face a grim mask. In their hands, Julius, it's 6 months of a lifestyle they cannot afford. And you haven't seen the worst part. Look at the withdrawals. He slid another page across the polished mahogany table. It was the detailed transaction history. My eyes scanned the page. It wasn't just the $1,500 mortgage payments. That was only a small part of it. There were other transfers, $5,000 on June 10th, $10,000 on August 1st, another $5,000 just 3 weeks ago. What are these? I asked, my blood running cold. These aren't mortgage payments. No, Kendrick said, his voice sharp and hard. Those are direct transfers, moved from the home equity line of credit straight into their joint checking account. Cash. Pure and simple. For whatever they wanted. He tapped the most recent $10,000 withdrawal. That Julius is your trip to St. Bart's. That's your first-class airfare. That's your beachfront villa. That's your $500 dinners. They have been living like royalty on your dime, on your equity. And they've been doing it while simultaneously planning to kick you to the curb for Christmas. The betrayal I had felt at their front door, the humiliation of that closed door, it was a clean cut, a sharp, sudden pain that shocked the system. This was something else entirely. This was a sickness. This was a rot. It was a deep, burrowing infection that had been festering for 6 months right under my feet, inside the very house I had paid for. And my son, Anthony, he knew. He had to have known. His name was on the HELOC application. He saw the bank statements. He knew they were systematically draining my retirement fund, my life savings. And he still stood there. He still stood in that foyer, looked at his expensive sneakers, and told me he wasn't expecting me. This changed everything. This was no longer just a family argument. This wasn't about my hurt feelings or a missed holiday dinner. This is a crime, I said. The words felt heavy and cold like stones in my mouth. This isn't just being ungrateful. This is financial abuse. This is grand theft. Legally, Kendrick said, leaning back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. It's a beautiful tangled mess. They'll claim you gave verbal permission. They'll say it was an unspoken family arrangement. It's complicated. Fraud is notoriously hard to prove within families, Julius. That's what they prey on. The assumption that you'd never really go after them. But they use the trust's asset as collateral, I insisted, my voice rising. Without my written permission as the trustee. That's what you said. That's the bedrock. And that is our legal hook, Kendrick confirmed, leaning forward again. It is a crystal clear breach of their fiduciary duty. They leveraged an asset that wasn't fully theirs to leverage. But Julius, to make this stick, to make this more than just a nasty civil lawsuit, we have to prove intent. We need to prove this wasn't just catastrophic financial mismanagement. We need to prove this was a deliberate, malicious, and calculated plan. I looked at the maxed out statement. $50,000 in 6 months isn't bad management, Kendrick. That is a bank robbery in slow motion. And now the money is gone. The line of credit is maxed. The bank is about to call in the loan. And they are planning to be on a beach in the Caribbean, out of the country, when the whole thing collapses. A horrible, sickening thought struck me so cold it took my breath. Kendrick. What if they don't come back? What if this is the whole plan? They drain the equity, they max out all their credit cards, and they disappear. They flee the country and leave me, the cosigner, holding the bag for the foreclosure and all the debt. Kendrick was silent for a long, heavy moment. He steepled his fingers again, looking at the documents. That, he said slowly, is a distinct and terrifying possibility. It's called asset stripping. You strip every dime of equity, you default on the loans, you declare bankruptcy from afar, and you start over somewhere new. Given what we are seeing here, it is a logical and frankly intelligent criminal next step. The room was silent save for the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner. My son, my only child, plotting perhaps to destroy me financially and flee. The pain of it was so vast, so deep, I couldn't even process it. It was too big to feel. So I pushed it down. I pushed the pain down deep, and I let the cold, hard logic of the builder take over. When you find rot in a foundation, you don't stand there and cry about it. You get your pry bar, you get your saw, and you expose it. You tear it all out piece by rotten piece until you are back on solid ground. You're right, I said, my voice now steady. We need to prove intent. These papers, they show what happened. They don't show why. The why is always the killer, Kendrick muttered. A prosecutor or even a civil judge needs a story. Right now we have a sad story about a father and an ungrateful son. We need a criminal story. We need the smoking gun, an email, a text message, a document hidden in a file cabinet that says, "Let's take the old man's money and run." And that document, I said the plan starting to form, is probably sitting in that house right now, in Tiffany's home office, on her laptop. I thought back to the way she had looked at me, the condescension, the pity, the utter lack of respect. She thought I was stupid, an old blue-collar fool who didn't understand the new economy of tech sales and high-end real estate. She had no idea that I, Julius Vaughn, had managed crews of 30 men, had balanced million-dollar budgets, and had built things that would outlast her memory. She had fatally underestimated me. I left Kendrick's office with a block of solid ice where my heart used to be. The $50,000 fraud was the fact. It was the what. But Kendrick was right. I needed the why. I needed the intent, the proof that would make this a criminal case, not just a sad family squabble. I knew with the certainty of a man who knows his tools that the proof was in that house. Tiffany was sloppy. She was arrogant. She would have left a trail. An email, a bank statement, a letter from a lawyer. People like her, they get high on their own cleverness. They get careless. But I had a problem. A big one. I had been kicked out. Tiffany would never let me pass the front door again, not after the way she'd dismissed me. If I showed up, she'd call the police. Anthony, weak as he was, would back her up. I sat in my truck for a long time just watching the traffic go by. How do you get into a fortress when the drawbridge is up? You don't. You wait for them to lower it for you. And why would they lower it? They wouldn't for Julius the father. They had no use for him. But what about Julius, the free handyman? What about Julius, the master carpenter, the man who had saved them thousands of dollars on repairs and inspections? They saw me as a tool, a useful if annoying old tool. Fine, I would be that tool. One last time, I needed a pretext, a reason to be there that had nothing to do with Christmas, nothing to do with feelings. I needed a problem only I could solve. I thought back to the house. It was a new build, but built fast and cheap. I remembered the foyer, the white oak floors I had paid for. When I stood there listening to Anthony tell me I wasn't welcome, I had shifted my weight. I remembered, or maybe I just decided I remembered, a slight give under my left foot. A faint sponginess. That was it. I drove home. I waited until 7 o'clock dinner time when I knew they'd be distracted. I picked up my phone. My hand was steady. My pulse was even. I was a man on a job. I dialed Anthony's number. It rang 3 times, then went to voicemail. I hung up. I waited 10 seconds and dialed again. This time he picked up on the second ring, his voice breathless and annoyed. "Hello?" "Anthony, it's your father." There was a long, heavy silence. I could hear a fork clatter on a plate. "Dad," he finally said, his voice wary, suspicious. He was expecting a fight. He was expecting me to beg. "Dad, I was going to call you. Look about the other day." "I'm not calling about that, son," I interrupted. I made my voice sound tired, resigned, defeated. "I'm not. What's done is done." The relief in his exhale was audible. "Oh, okay. Good. Good. I was lying in bed last night and I couldn't stop thinking about it," I said. "Thinking about what?" "That floor," I said. "The white oak in the foyer. When I was standing there, I felt a slight warp under my foot, right by the door." "The floor?" he said, confused. "Dad, the floor is fine. Tiffany just had it cleaned." "Maybe," I said. "Maybe, but those planks are cupping, son. I felt it. That happens for one reason: humidity. You've got moisture coming up from the subfloor. With these new houses, they build them so tight, if the HVAC in the basement isn't balanced, the moisture gets trapped. It'll ruin that entire floor. It'll be a $20,000 job to tear it out and replace it. $20,000 easy." I let the number hang in the air. I knew my son. He was terrified of losing money, especially money he didn't really have. 20,000, he stammered. You're sure?" "I'm not sure," I said, "but I'm worried. I'm worried about your investment. Look, I've got my professional moisture meter in the truck. I was going to be in Alpharetta tomorrow morning anyway, pricing a job. I can just swing by. Won't take me 10 minutes. I just want to get a reading from the subfloor. I'll check the basement, check the humidity levels. Better safe than sorry, right?" He was hooked. I could hear him thinking. I heard his muffled voice. "It's my dad. He thinks the floor is warping. Yeah, 20 grand. No, just 10 minutes. He came back on the line. Tiffany's not... She's got a big showing tomorrow. That's perfect, I said, making my voice bright. That's even better. I don't want to be in her way. I can just slip in, get my readings, and slip right back out. She doesn't even have to know. I'll just be, taking care of the house, like I always do. I had given him the perfect out. He could avoid a $20,000 repair and avoid a fight with his wife. Okay, Anthony said, the decision made. Yeah, okay, that sounds smart. Tomorrow morning, what time? 10 o'clock, I said. I'll be in and out before she even knows I was there. Thanks, Dad, he said, the relief thick in his voice. I appreciate this. Really. Just looking out for my boy, I said, and hung up the phone. I let out the breath I had been holding for 2 straight minutes. The performance had been flawless. He hadn't heard a trace of anger. He'd only heard the familiar, reliable, useful father he had always taken for granted. He thought I was coming to check the humidity. I was coming to check the receipts. I was no longer Julius Vaughn, the grieving father. I was a Trojan horse, and tomorrow morning my son was going to open the gate and wheel me right inside. I pulled up at 9:59 a.m. My old truck felt out of place on the quiet, perfectly manicured street. I was carrying my old leather tool bag, the one Cynthia had given me for our 20th anniversary. It was heavy, but inside there was only one tool I cared about: my digital moisture meter. The rest was just for show. I walked up the stone pathway. My heart was not pounding. I felt calm. I was a carpenter on a job. I rang the bell. Anthony opened it almost immediately, as if he had been waiting by the door. He was already dressed for work, wearing a button-down shirt that was slightly wrinkled. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Dad," he whispered, glancing back into the empty house. "Hey, come on in." He stepped aside. I walked into the foyer, my boots making a solid, reassuring sound on the white oak floors. "Is she—" I started to ask. "She's gone," Anthony said quickly. "She had a 9 a.m. showing across town. She won't be back until this afternoon. We're good." He was wringing his hands. "So the floor, is it bad? 20 grand, you said." I put on my professional face. I knelt my bad knee, screaming in protest, and put my tool bag down. I ran my hand over the planks by the door, frowning. I pressed down. "It's got give, son," I said, my voice full of gravelly concern. "It's cupping. See how the edges are raised? That's moisture, no doubt about it." He hadn't seen a thing, but he nodded vigorously. Right, cupping. That's bad." I pulled out the moisture meter. I turned it on, and the small digital screen lit up. I pressed the 2 small prongs into the seam between the planks. The meter beeped and gave a reading. 18%, I said, shaking my head. "It should be 6, maybe 7. Yeah, we've got a problem." I was lying. The meter read 6.5%. It was perfect. Anthony's face went pale. 18. "Oh God, what do we do?" "It's coming from underneath," I said, standing up. "The reading is too high for it to be surface moisture. It's coming up from the subfloor. That means the source is in the basement. I need to check the HVAC unit, see how it's draining. And I need to check the foundation wall right under this spot, see if there's a hairline crack." "The basement, right," Anthony said, nodding. He looked at his watch. "Crap, I've got that all-hands meeting at 10:30. I have to go." He was practically vibrating with the need to escape. He didn't want to be there. He didn't want to deal with the floor or with me. "You go on," I said, waving him off. "This is what I do, son. I'll get to the bottom of it. I'll just lock the door on my way out. Just show me the basement door." "It's just down the hall," he said, visibly relieved. He led me to a door I had only been through once before. He opened it, revealing the carpeted stairs. "Utility room is to the left. Just pull the front door shut when you leave. It locks automatically. And, Dad, let me know if it's, 20 grand. "I'll let you know, Anthony," I said. "Now go on. Don't be late." He grabbed his laptop bag, gave me a weak, grateful smile, and hurried out the front door. I heard the click as it locked behind him. I was alone. I stood in the silent, massive house. The only sound was the hum of the oversized refrigerator. I did not go to the foyer. I did not care about the floor. I walked down the hall and through the door to the basement. The stairs were plush. The basement was finished, a huge open space with a 90-inch television, a wet bar, and a pool table. It was a man cave that I doubted my son ever used. To the left, as he'd said, was a solid wood door, the utility room. I opened it. It was a different world. Concrete floors, the massive furnace and water heater, and the main electrical panel. And in the corner, exactly what I was looking for. 2 large blue recycling bins. They were full. This was clearly trash day. I put my tool bag down. I did not look at the furnace. I walked straight to the bins. The first one was full of Amazon boxes and empty wine bottles. Not just 1 or 2, a lot of them. The second bin was for paper, junk mail catalogs, magazines. I put my hand in my calloused fingers sorting through the glossy paper. And then I felt it. A stack of thinner, cheaper paper folded together. Business envelopes. I pulled out the stack. My heart, which had been so calm, gave a single hard jolt. They were not junk mail. They were bank statements. The first one I saw was from American Express, but it wasn't addressed to Anthony. It wasn't even addressed to Anthony and Tiffany Vaughn. It was addressed to Ms. Tiffany Vaughn. At this address, my hands started to shake. I had always assumed they shared everything. A joint account, a partnership. This was hers. I unfolded the statement. It was for a platinum card. The due date was December 10th. I scanned past the marketing down to the 2 most important numbers. New balance, $22, $450, 118. Minimum payment, due, $850, $100. I felt the air leave my lungs. $22,000 on 1 card. I dug back into the bin. There was another one, from Capital One, a venture card, also addressed only to Ms. Tiffany Vaughn. New balance, $1,802.44. Minimum payment due, $700. I dug again, my hands frantic now. A third, a Chase Sapphire. New balance, $14,600. Minimum payment, due, $620. I dropped the papers on the concrete floor. I did the math in my head. 22, 18, 14, over $55,000. $55,000 in secret personal credit card debt. And her minimum payments just for these 3 cards were over $2,000 a month. It was a house of cards. A complete, total, catastrophic house of cards. My eyes scanned the charges. This was the why. This was where the HELOC money had gone. It wasn't just paying their share of the mortgage. It was being siphoned piece by piece to service her secret debt. The transaction list read like a fantasy. Gucci, $2,800. Louis Vuitton, $1,950. Aria Resort Las Vegas, $4,200. St. Elmo Steakhouse, $650. She wasn't just living a lie. She was living a completely different life. I suddenly understood. The $50,000 from my HELOC wasn't for St. Bart's. It was to pay off these cards to wipe the slate clean so she could continue the scam. She was juggling tens of thousands in debt, and she had just found a fresh $50,000 in my home equity to play with. Julius Vaughn, was not her father-in-law. I was her line of credit. I was the financial drain she was complaining about because my money was getting harder to access. And my son, Anthony. Did he know I looked at the statements again, addressed only to her? This was her secret. She wasn't just defrauding me. She was defrauding her own husband. She was a professional. This wasn't just greed. This was a sickness. This was a deep, calculated con. I thought of her telling me there was no room. My God. My hands were shaking, but not with fear. It was rage. A cold, pure rage. I pulled out my cell phone. I knelt on the hard, cold concrete, my bad knee forgotten. I laid each statement flat. I smoothed the wrinkles, and I began to take pictures, one by one, the first page. First, the transaction page, the minimum payment, Every single number. I captured every piece of evidence. I photographed the American Express, the Capital One, the chase. This was the intent. This was the motive. This was the smoking gun. Kendrick was right. This wasn't a family squabble. This was a criminal enterprise. I finished. I carefully, precisely folded the statements exactly as I had found them. I tucked them back into the recycling bin underneath the Victoria's Secret catalog. I stood up. I picked up my tool bag. I walked upstairs, my steps heavy but solid. I went to the foyer and knelt one last time. I pressed the meter to the floor. 6.5%. Perfect. I walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped out into the cold air. I pulled the door shut, hearing the heavy, satisfying thud as the automatic lock engaged. I walked to my truck, the evidence secure in my phone. I had been planning to call Anthony and tell him the floor was fine. Now I was going to let him twist. Let him worry about the $20,000. Let him worry about the floor caving in. It was nothing. Nothing compared to the hole that was about to open up right under his feet. I had the what from the bank, and now I had the why from the trash. My next stop was back to Kendrick's office, but on the way I felt a gnawing. One piece was still missing. I had her debt. I had her motive. But I still didn't have the final plan. What was the end game? The answer I knew was not in the trash. It was with the one person in that house who was also a victim. The one person who had looked at me with shame and sadness. Zoe. I carefully, meticulously placed the credit card statements back in the recycling bin exactly as I had found them hidden beneath a pile of junk mail. The evidence was secure on my phone. The $55,000 in secret debt. The Gucci and the trips to Vegas. I had the why. I had the motive. My hands were steady again. The rage had cooled and hardened into something else. Purpose. I stood up, my knees cracking in protest from kneeling on the cold concrete. I picked up my tool bag. I had what I came for. The lie about the floor had served its purpose. I walked up the plush basement stairs, my boots silent on the thick carpet. The house was empty. The silence was heavy, oppressive. It was the silence of a museum, not a home. I walked down the hall past the grand foyer. My original plan was to walk out the front door and lock it behind me. But something stopped me. A feeling. A carpenter's intuition. The kind of feeling that tells you a support beam is compromised even when it looks fine. I looked at the front door. Then I looked at the other door, the one that led to the garage. If I left through the front, I'd be visible to the street, to any neighbors. Tiffany was a real estate agent. She knew her neighbors. They were her eyes and ears. But the garage was private. I changed course. I walked to the garage door, turned the knob, and stepped inside. It was dark. The only light came from two small windows in the massive garage door. My eyes adjusted. I saw Tiffany's white, brand-new Escalade on the right, Anthony's leased BMW on the left. Cars I had in effect been paying for. The garage was full of storage boxes, piled high, bicycles Zoe had long since outgrown. I navigated around the front of the Escalade, heading for the side door that led to the driveway. I was almost there, my hand reaching for the doorknob when a small voice cut through the darkness. "Grandpa!" I froze. My heart hammered in my chest. I spun around. Zoe. She stepped out from behind a tall stack of storage containers. She was trembling, her arms wrapped around herself. She was still in her pajamas. "Zoe," I whispered, my voice rough. "Child, you scared me half to death. Why aren't you in school?" I told Mom I had cramps," she said, her voice shaking. "I couldn't go. I couldn't. Not after the other day." My anger, the cold rage from the basement, instantly evaporated, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. I saw the same shame in her eyes that I had seen on the staircase. The same humiliation. This child was being torn apart. "Zoe, baby," I said, stepping toward her. "This ain't your burden. This is not your fault. This is between me and your parents." "No," she said, and a tear rolled down her pale cheek. "It is my burden because I hear things. I'm not supposed to, but I hear them. They think I'm asleep or I have my headphones on. But I hear them. I hear Mom on the phone." I became very still. The air in the garage felt thick. What do you hear, Zoe?" "I'm so sorry, Grandpa." She whispered the words, choking her. "I'm so sorry. I heard them after you left. The day you brought my gift." I waited. I didn't breathe. Dad. Dad was upset, she said. He was saying, he's my father, Tiffany. We can't just kick him out. He was standing up for you, a little. And your mother, I asked, my voice flat. She was yelling, Zoe whispered, flinching at the memory. She was screaming. She said you were a financial drain. The words. I had felt them. I had known them. But hearing them spoken, hearing that my 16-year-old granddaughter had been forced to hear them, that was a new kind of wound. A financial drain. After $300,000. After $50,000 in stolen equity. She said I was, what, a financial drain, Zoe repeated, her voice cracking. She said you were sucking the life out of their marriage, that you were interfering, and she told Dad he was weak. She called him a mama's boy who was still tied to his father's apron strings. I closed my eyes. The insults were meant to break him, to separate him from me. And Dad, he tried, Zoe said, desperate for me to know. He said he's my father, Tiffany. He helped us. He yelled it. And that's when Mom, she said the real thing. The real thing, Zoe looked terrified, as if saying the words would make them come true. She gave him an ultimatum, Grandpa. The silence in the garage was absolute. She said, Zoe's voice was so quiet I had to lean in. She said, it's him or me, Anthony. You have one chance. You either cut that old man out of our lives, you get rid of him for good, or I am leaving you. I mean it. I will file for divorce and I will take everything. She said it, Grandpa. She threatened to divorce him if he didn't kick you out. There it was. It wasn't a piece of the puzzle. It was the frame. The final missing boundary that made the entire ugly picture make sense. This wasn't just about greed. It wasn't just about a vacation. It was a hostile takeover. A systematic, vicious plan to isolate my son, seize control of the assets, and cut me, the only remaining tie to his conscience, out of the picture for good. The credit card debt I'd found. It all snapped into focus. This was her leverage. She was threatening to leave Anthony, but she was probably planning on it all along. I opened my arms, and Zoe fell into my chest, sobbing. I held her, my rough jacket soaking up her tears. I was no longer fighting for my money. I was no longer fighting for my pride. I was fighting for this child, this innocent, terrified child trapped in a war zone. It's okay, baby, I whispered into her hair. It's okay. You are so brave. You did the right thing by telling me. I hate it here, she sobbed. I hate what she's doing to him. I hate what she's doing to you. I don't want to stay with friends. I wanted to be with you for Christmas. I told them I just wanted to be with you. My resolve hardened from ice into diamond. It was done. It was, Zoe, I said, pulling back to look her in the eyes. I wiped her tears with my rough thumb. This is more important than you know. What you just told me, it changes everything. I need to ask you one more thing, and you have to be honest. She sniffled, nodding. Your mother, she's planning this, the divorce. Have you seen any papers, letters from lawyers? Zoe's face went white. She froze. Zoe, I think so, she whispered. Last week, I went into her office. I was just looking for a stapler for my homework. She keeps it locked, but it was open, and there was a letter on her desk. I didn't read it. I swear. I just saw the name at the top. The letterhead. Collins West and Harding Attorneys at Law. Collins West and Harding. I knew that name. Kendrick knew that name. It was the most expensive, most aggressive divorce firm in Atlanta. The endgame was clear. It wasn't a maybe. It was a fact. She was already retaining counsel. She was planning to run. She would drain my equity, force Anthony to break with me, go on her trip, and then come back and file for divorce, leaving my son holding the bag for a defaulted mortgage and $55,000 in secret debt. It was brilliant, and it was pure evil. Zoe, I said, my voice firm but gentle, you listen to me. You are a brave girl, braver than anyone in this house. I need you to go back inside. Go to your room. Lock your door. and you do not say a word, not to your father, and especially not to your mother. Do you understand me? This is our secret." She nodded, wiping her eyes. Are you going to be okay, Grandpa?" I looked at her, this child who was my only true family left. I gave her a hard, sad smile. "I'm going to be just fine, baby," I said. "Now go, before she comes back." She gave me one last desperate hug, and then slipped back into the house, closing the door behind her with a soft click. I stood alone in the dark garage. I had it all. The motive, $55,000 in secret debt. The leverage, a threat of divorce. The weapon, $50,000 in stolen equity from my trust. The plan to isolate and abandon my son, leaving me to pay for the wreckage. I walked out the side door into the cold November air. The game was over. Now it was just a matter of the final score. I held my granddaughter Zoe as she cried into my jacket right there in the dark, cold garage. She was trembling. She gave him an ultimatum, Grandpa," Zoe whispered, her voice choked with tears. "She told Dad, it's him or me. You get rid of that old man, or I'm filing for divorce and I'm taking everything." There it was. The leverage. The threat that had turned my son from a weak man into a coward. He wasn't just protecting his wife, he was trying to save his marriage. She's been on the phone with them for weeks." Zoe sniffled, pulling back. "With who, baby?" I asked, my voice gentle. "The lawyers." She whispered, her eyes wide with a fear that no 16-year-old should ever have. "I told you, Collins, West, and Harding. I hear her in her office. She keeps it locked, but I hear her. She's always yelling about liquid assets and separating accounts." I stroked her hair. "You are so brave, Zoe. So much braver than anyone in this house." "Wait," she said, her face suddenly pale with a new thought. She was on a video call this morning before she left. She was yelling at her laptop. She was mad. After she left, I went into her office. I know the code. It's my birthday." My blood ran cold. "Zoe." "She left her laptop on purpose," she said, her words coming faster. And she left this folder on her desk. She wasn't supposed to. She was in a hurry." "Zoe, what folder?" She didn't answer. She looked over her shoulder, terrified. Then she let go of me, ran to the stack of storage containers she had been hiding behind, and pulled out a thick manila envelope. It was stuffed with papers. I grabbed it, Grandpa," she said, pushing it into my hands. The folder was warm from being hidden against her body. "I don't know what it is, but it has that lawyer's name on it. I got scared. I heard her Escalade pull out, and I took it and ran down here to hide." I looked down at the folder. It was an official document folder, the kind lawyers use, and there embossed in gold was the letterhead Collins, West, and Harding Attorneys at Law. This was not a letter. This was her entire case file. I gripped the folder. My hand, the calloused carpenter's hand, was steady. This was the final piece. "Zoe," I said, my voice low and urgent. "You go back inside. You go to your room. You lock your door. You say nothing. You have cramps. You've been sick all day. You have not seen me. You do not know anything about this folder. Do you understand me? This is the most important part." She nodded, wiping her face. Are you going to get in trouble?" "No," I said, my voice like iron. "Your mother is. Now go. Be strong. I will handle this. I will fix this." She gave me one last quick hug and slipped back into the house, closing the door behind her with a soft, final click. I stood alone in the garage. I didn't leave through the side door. I opened the main garage door, got in my truck, and backed out in plain sight. I had the evidence. I didn't care who saw me anymore. I drove. I didn't go to Kendrick's office. I couldn't. I couldn't look at this with him, not yet. I needed to see it for myself. I drove 2 miles to a small public park, a place I used to take Anthony to play catch. It was deserted. The November wind was sharp and the sky was a dull, unforgiving gray. I parked the truck, killed the engine, and the cab was filled with a heavy silence. I put the folder on my lap. My hands were shaking now. I untied the small red string and opened the flap. The top page was a letter. "Dear Tiffany, it began. It was a strategy memo, a multi-page document from her lead attorney. I began to read. Tiffany Per, our discussion this memo outlines the recommended 5-step strategy for your dissolution of marriage. The key to our success will be speed liquidity and limiting your exposure to your father-in-law's counterclaims. My breath hitched. I read on. Step 1. Establish irreconcilable differences. Your husband's attachment to his father, Julius Vaughn, serves as a perfect narrative for emotional abandonment. The Christmas ultimatum you've delivered is a crucial first step. We need him to choose, and when he does, you will have your grounds for leaving. Step 2. Secure liquid assets. Prior to filing, the home equity line of credit HELOC you have established in the amount of $50,000 is the perfect vehicle. We strongly advise you transfer the full remaining balance to your private non-joint account before your departure for St. Bart's. This will be your exit fund. I had to stop. I closed my eyes. Exit fund. The $50,000 wasn't just to pay her debts. It was her escape money. My money. I forced myself to keep reading. Step 3. The St. Bart's trip. This will serve as your separation period. It is vital you go alone, or at least without your husband. It establishes a clear date of separation. We will file the petition upon your return. Step 4. The marital asset. The house. This is your primary point of exposure. Your father-in-law's trust holds the majority equity, and he is a co-signer on the note. This asset is problematic. It is hopelessly entangled. Therefore, we will not be fighting for the house. Step 5. The payoff. This is the critical part. By ceasing all payments, the mortgage will default on or around December 1st. This will and must happen. The default will trigger a pre-foreclosure action from the bank. This action will be directed at all parties on the note, including your father-in-law. The bank's claim will effectively tie up your father-in-law's trust in litigation for years. In the ensuing chaos, you will be long gone with the $50,000 in liquid cash. Your husband, Anthony, as co-signer, will be left to face the foreclosure, the deficiency judgment, and all joint consumer debts. I had to put the paper down. I felt physically ill. I couldn't breathe. It was all there. A calculated, sociopathic, brilliant plan. She was going to burn the house to the ground financially. She was going to use my own money to start a new life, and she was going to use the bank's lawsuit as a smokescreen to cover her escape. I wouldn't even be thinking about her. I'd be too busy fighting the bank to save my trust's $300,000. And my son. Left to face the foreclosure and all joint consumer debts. The $55,000 in credit card debt I'd found in the trash. She was going to saddle him with that too. She wasn't just leaving him. She was executing him. I looked deeper into the folder. It was worse. There were bank statements for a private account at a bank in the Cayman Islands. An account with a $49,000 deposit dated 2 days ago. And underneath that, a one-way flight confirmation. From St. Bart's to London. 2 days after Christmas. She wasn't just planning to divorce Anthony. She was planning to vanish. I sat back in my truck, the silence of the empty park deafening. The papers were on my lap, the entire conspiracy, the whole ugly, rotten truth. I had been nothing but a bank, a resource to be tapped, drained, and then discarded. And my son was just the fool she had used to get to me. He was the collateral damage. I carefully, precisely put every single paper back in the manila folder. I tied the red string. My rage was gone. My sadness was gone. My shock was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard weight of the truth. I was no longer a victim. I was no longer a father. I was a witness, and I was holding the evidence. I started the truck. The F-150's engine rumbled to life. I did not drive home. I did not drive to the bank. I drove straight to Kendrick Turner's office. I had the what. I had the why. And now, thanks to my granddaughter, I had the how. I had the entire criminal case sitting on my passenger seat. The 1st of December came and went with an almost holy silence. It was a Tuesday. I spent the day at my local library reading old newspapers surrounded by the quiet rustle of pages. I did not check my phone. I ate a simple dinner. I went to bed at 9 p.m. I slept soundly for the first time in a week. The 1st was the day the payment was due. the day my $2,000 transfer failed to arrive. The day Kendrick's legal notice hit the bank's fraud department, freezing the $50,000 HELOC. It was the day the entire $3,500 mortgage payment went into default. I knew as a builder knows the properties of wood that the bank's automated system would register the failure instantly, but it would take at least 12 hours for the human-level panic to begin. I woke up on December 2nd at my usual time, 6 a.m. I put on the coffee pot. The rich, dark smell filled my small kitchen. I made myself 2 eggs over easy with a piece of toast. I sat at my kitchen table looking out the window as the sun began to light up the gray Atlanta sky. At 7:03 a.m., my phone charging on the counter remained silent. At 7:30 a.m., I poured my second cup of coffee. At 8:01 a.m., the phone rang. It buzzed on the Formica countertop, a harsh, vibrating sound that cut through the quiet. I looked at the screen. Anthony? I did not move. I let it ring. 1, 2, 3, 4 times. It clicked over to voicemail. I waited. I counted to 60. The phone rang again. Anthony? I let it ring. It went to voicemail. A minute later, the phone buzzed, a text message from Anthony. Dad, call me. It's important. I sipped my coffee. It was still hot. The phone rang again almost immediately. Anthony! He was getting frantic. He was bypassing the wait. I let it ring. Voicemail. The phone rang again. This time the caller ID was Tiffany Vaughn. I smiled. A thin, cold smile that didn't touch my eyes. I let it ring. She, unlike Anthony, did not hang up. She let it ring and ring and ring 12 times, a desperate, angry demand, until the system finally cut her off and sent her to voicemail. I stood up, walked over and pressed the button to listen to the messages on speakerphone. The first message was from Anthony. His voice was confused, annoyed. Dad, hey, just got a weird alert from Wells Fargo. Said the mortgage payment was missed. Did you forget to fund the account or something? It's the first. You always pay on the first. Call me. The second message recorded just minutes later. Anthony again. The confusion was gone. Now there was a tremor of fear. Dad, I just called the bank. They said the payment wasn't just late, it was rejected. They said your automatic payment was canceled. Dad, what did you do? Did you cancel it? Why would you do that? Call me. This is serious. The third message. Tiffany. Her voice was not fearful. It was pure, distilled rage. Julius, I don't know what kind of sick, childish game you are playing, but you turn that payment back on right now. You are not going to ruin our credit. You are not going to sabotage us. You pick up this phone. Click. I sipped my coffee. The fourth message. Anthony. He was breathing heavily as if he'd been running. Dad, it's... Oh God, Dad, I just got off the phone with the HELOC department. They froze the line of credit. They froze the $50,000. They said they received a legal inquiry from your lawyer about fraudulent activity and breach of trust. A lawyer. Dad, what did you do? What did you tell them? You're destroying everything. You're... Call me. The fifth message. Tiffany again. She was no longer yelling. Her voice was low, fast, and venomous like a snake hissing. You old man, you senile, bitter old fool. You think you're clever. You think you can do this. I will end you, Julius. I will see you in court. I will take every last cent you have for this. You have no idea who you're messing with. I looked at my phone. The screen was lit up like a Christmas tree, which felt appropriate. Anthony, Tiffany, Anthony, Anthony, Tiffany. The calls kept coming one after another, tumbling over each other. They weren't even leaving coherent messages anymore. Just hang-ups. Missed calls, 9 a.m. I looked at the screen. 15 missed calls. 9:30 a.m. 20 missed calls. By 10 o'clock, as I was rinsing my coffee cup in the sink, the final tally was in. 25 missed calls. I had smiled when my son told me I wasn't welcome for Christmas. I had gotten in my truck and driven away. And now, 2 days later, they were in a blind panic. They thought I was just a sad old man. They thought I was a financial drain. They had forgotten one very important thing. I am a builder. I know that a house doesn't collapse all at once. It fails because someone somewhere compromised the foundation. They had been chipping away at my foundation for years. They just never expected me to take out the center beam that was holding the whole rotten structure up. I dried my hands. I put on my good jacket. I had all the evidence from Tiffany's office, the emails, the Cayman Islands bank account, the one-way ticket to London. It was time to go see Kendrick. It was time to show him the entire ugly blueprint. The phone rang again as I was walking out the door. Anthony? I silenced it and put it in my pocket. The storm had hit them. Now it was time for the thunder. I sat at my small kitchen table. The sun was fully up now, streaming in, lighting up the dust motes dancing in the air. In front of me was my second cup of black coffee. On the counter, my phone had become a living, shrieking thing. It was 8:15 in the morning. It had started at 8:01. First Anthony confused, then Anthony again scared, then Tiffany furious, then Anthony again in absolute throat-shredding panic. The calls were tumbling in, one on top of the other. They weren't even waiting for the voicemail to finish before trying to call again. The screen was a strobe light of their names. Anthony, Tiffany, Anthony, Anthony, Tiffany. I calmly lifted my coffee cup. It was hot. I took a sip. I was in no hurry. I had all the time in the world. They, on the other hand, were just finding out that their time was up. The phone fell silent for a moment. They were probably talking to each other, screaming at each other. The blame would be flying thick and fast. Then it buzzed, a new voicemail. I stood up, walked over, and pressed the speakerphone button. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear every word. The first message, the one from 8:01, played. Anthony's voice tight with forced casualness. Dad, hey, I just got a weird alert from Wells Fargo. Said the mortgage payment was missed. Did you forget to fund the account or something? It's the first. You always pay on the first. Call me. I smiled. Forget. He thought I was senile, forgetful, harmless. The speaker beeped. The second message. Dad, I just called the bank. They said the payment wasn't just late, it was rejected. They said your automatic payment was canceled. Dad, what did you do? Did you cancel it? Why would you do that? Call me. This is serious. The third message, Tiffany. Her voice was sharp, impatient, like she was talking to a disobedient dog. Julius, I don't know what kind of sick, childish game you are playing, but you turn that payment back on right now. You are not going to ruin our credit. You are not going to sabotage us. You pick up this phone. I took another sip of coffee. Sabotage. That was a good word. The fourth message. This one was the masterpiece. Anthony. He was breathing so heavily I could barely make out the words. He must have been pacing, running his hands through his hair. Dad, it's... Oh God, Dad. I just got off the phone with the HELOC department. They froze the line of credit. They froze the $50,000. They said they received a legal inquiry from your lawyer about fraudulent activity and breach of trust. A lawyer. Dad, what did you do? What did you tell them? You're destroying everything. You're... Call me. Click. The word lawyer hung in the air of my small kitchen. It had hit them. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a forgotten payment. This was a deliberate, calculated legal action. The foundation wasn't just cracked. It was gone. And then the fifth message. Tiffany again. The mask was completely off. This wasn't the polished real estate agent. This wasn't the charming, superior daughter-in-law. This was the con artist in the basement, the one with $55,000 in secret debt. This was the animal cornered. You old man, she shrieked, her voice so loud the speaker on my phone distorted. You senile, bitter, selfish old fool. You think you're clever. You think you can do this. I will end you, Julius. Do you hear me? I will see you in court. I will take every last cent you have for this. I will tell the judge you are incompetent. I will have you declared unfit. You have no idea who you're messing with. You have no idea. Click. I found myself nodding. Oh, I think I do, Tiffany, I whispered to the empty room. I know exactly who I'm messing with. But you have no idea. The phone immediately started ringing again. Anthony. I let it go. Tiffany. I let it go. They were a duet of panic, a symphony of consequences. My phone buzzed. A text from Anthony. Dad, pick up the phone. Tiffany is... She's going crazy. She's throwing things. She says you've ruined us. Another text. She's calling her lawyer. You need to fix this now. Another text. Stop this, Dad. Whatever you're doing, just stop it. We're sorry. Okay, we're sorry about Christmas, just stop. Sorry. The word looked pathetic on the small screen. Sorry for Christmas, not sorry for the 50,000, not sorry for the fraud, not sorry for the plan to leave him ruined and fleeing the country. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were just sorry they got caught. I watched the phone as it continued its frantic dance on the counter. The calls kept coming. The texts piled up. 9 a.m. I looked at the screen. 15 missed calls. 9:30 a.m. 20 missed calls. I finished my coffee. I went into the bathroom, I showered, and I shaved. I put on a clean pair of pants and a pressed blue button-down shirt, the same simple clothes I had worn my whole life. The clothes of a man who works, not a man who steals. By 10 o'clock, as I was combing my hair, the phone had fallen quiet. They had exhausted themselves. They had probably finally called their own lawyers who would have told them the one thing they didn't want to hear: stop calling him. You're only making it worse. I walked back into the kitchen. The phone was dark. I picked it up. I opened the call log. 25 missed calls, 10 text messages, 7 voicemails. I had smiled when my son told me I wasn't welcome. I had gotten in my truck and driven away, and now 2 days later the empire they had built on my back was beginning to crumble. They thought I was a financial drain. They had forgotten one simple truth: you can't drain a well that's been cut off from the source, and you can't stand on a foundation that you yourself have turned to dust. I put my phone in my pocket. It was time to go see Kendrick. It was time to show him the entire ugly blueprint. The phone rang one more time as I was walking out the door. Anthony. I silenced it and put it in my pocket. The storm had hit them. Now it was time for the thunder. I locked my apartment door behind me, a free man. I walked into Kendrick Turner's office at 10:30 in the morning. I didn't have an appointment. His secretary, Maria, looked up, her eyes wide. "Mr. Vaughn, he's with a client." I didn't stop. I walked right past her desk, holding the manila folder from Tiffany's office. "He'll want to see me," I said. I knocked once on his solid oak door and opened it. Kendrick was at his desk with a young couple, all of them looking at a pile of papers. He looked up annoyed. "Julius, I'm in a—" "Get them out," I said, my voice low. "Get them out, Kendrick, now." My voice, the look on my face, it was enough. Kendrick Turner, one of the most respected lawyers in Atlanta, immediately stood up. "Folks," he said to the couple, "a serious matter has just come to my attention. Maria will reschedule you. My apologies." He ushered them out, his face a mask of confusion and concern. As soon as the door clicked shut, he turned on me. "Julius, what in God's name, you can't just—" I didn't say a word. I walked to his conference table, the long, polished one where we had looked at the HELOC statements. I untied the red string and dropped the contents of Tiffany's legal file onto the mahogany. The strategy memo, the Cayman Islands bank statement, the one-way flight confirmation to London. "You said you needed intent, Kendrick," I said, my voice quiet. "You said you needed a smoking gun. Well, here's the whole damn arsenal." Kendrick stared at the papers. He picked up the letterhead from Collins West and Harding. His eyebrows shot up. This is the top divorce firm in the state, Julius. Where did you get this?" "Does it matter?" I said. "Read it." For 5 minutes, the only sound in the office was the rustle of paper and the ticking of the grandfather clock. I watched Kendrick's face. He started with confusion. That turned to disbelief. His dark eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened. When he got to the part about Step 5, the payoff, the part about letting the mortgage default to tie me up in litigation, he let out a low, soft whistle. He read the memo twice. Then he picked up the Cayman Islands bank statement. $49,000. Transferred 2 days ago. Then he picked up the flight confirmation. St. Bart's to London. One way. He carefully, precisely put all the papers back in a neat stack. He looked up at me. The friend was gone. The lawyer was gone. What I saw in his eyes was something else. It was the cold, focused fury of an apex predator. "She's not just a con artist, Julius," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "She's a sociopath. This is one of the most brazen, vicious, and well-documented exit plans I have ever seen. She wasn't just planning to leave him. She was planning to financially execute him. And you." "I know," I said. "So what do we do?" Kendrick smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "What do we do?" "Julius, she's already done it. She's handed us her entire confession. Our job now is just to set the trap." He walked to his desk. He buzzed his secretary. "Maria, cancel my next 2 appointments. I don't care what they are. And get me a courier, a fast one." He turned back to me. "Here is what happens next. This is no longer a small, sad family dispute. This is a multi-count criminal case. We have wire fraud, bank fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. That $50,000 HELOC isn't a family loan anymore. It's a stolen asset. That one-way ticket is proof of intent to flee." He sat down and pulled out a fresh legal pad. "First," he said, "we stop her from running." He picked up his phone. He dialed. "Get me Judge Braxton's clerk. Yes, I'll hold." He looked at me. "We are filing an emergency ex parte motion for a temporary restraining order, an asset freeze. I am faxing him this entire folder. By noon today, that Cayman Islands account will be frozen. That $50,000 she thinks is her exit fund, she won't be able to buy a pack of gum with it." He got the clerk on the line and spoke in low, fast legal terms. It was done in 2 minutes. He hung up. "Second," he said, pulling a new set of documents toward him, "we dismantle her leverage. Her entire plan hinges on her divorce lawyer being the aggressor. We are about to flip the board." He began to type, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "I am drafting a notice of breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, and conspiracy. It is not going to just Anthony and Tiffany. It is being couriered right now to the head partner at Collins West and Harding." "What does that do?" I asked. "What does that do?" Kendrick's grim smile returned. "It informs her high-priced lawyer that his client has been caught red-handed in a criminal conspiracy. It informs him that his client's exit fund is now frozen. It informs him that his client lied to him about the nature of the assets. It informs him that if he proceeds with her divorce filing, we will countersue him and his firm for conspiracy to commit fraud. It effectively forces him to fire her as a client. Today, she is now trapped with no money and no lawyer." He printed the document. It was 5 pages long. "Finally," he said, "the house." "She was just going to let it burn," I said. "And we," Kendrick said, "are going to take it away. This notice also includes a non-negotiable demand. We are triggering the breach of contract clause from the trust investment. We are demanding a forced sale of the property to recoup the trust's full investment. Not just the $300,000, Julius. We are demanding the full $350,000 plus legal fees. The stolen $50,000 comes off the top before they see a single penny." He signed the last page with a flourish. He buzzed Maria. "Maria, get that courier in here. This package goes to Collins West and Harding. This one," he said, holding another, "goes by process server this afternoon to the house in Alpharetta." He leaned back, the work done. "And now we wait. But we won't wait long. We haven't just blocked her move, Julius. We've checkmated her. Her exit fund is frozen. Her lawyer is about to abandon her. And the house she was using as a bomb is now our asset to reclaim. She has nowhere to run. She's trapped in the very house she thought she was escaping." I stood up. The phone in my pocket, which had been silent, suddenly buzzed. A new text. From Anthony. "Dad, I'm at the bank. They're telling me a judge has frozen our accounts. A judge. What is happening?" I looked at Kendrick. He just nodded as if to say, "It's begun." I was home. I had been home for about an hour. I was sitting in my recliner nursing a glass of water, just waiting. The text message from Anthony, "A judge has frozen our accounts," told me everything I needed to know. The trap was set. Kendrick's legal notices had landed. The asset freeze was in place. I knew they wouldn't call again. They were past that. A judge. That word changes everything. They wouldn't call. They would come. It was just after 6 p.m. The sun was down. The streetlights outside my apartment window cast long, pale shadows into the room. And then I heard it. Not a knock. A slam. A fist hammering on my apartment door. "Dad, open this door, Dad!" Anthony's voice. It wasn't just panicked anymore. It was raw, shredded, desperate. I heard another sharper sound. "Bam, bam, bam! Julius, open this door right now, you old bastard! Open it!" Tiffany. She was hitting the door with, I assumed, both fists. I sat very still. I let them pound. I let the neighbors hear. Let them show the whole building what kind of people they were. "Dad, I'm not kidding. I'll break it down. Open the door." I stood up slowly. I did not hurry. I walked to the door. I looked through the peephole. They were both there, illuminated by the harsh hallway light. Anthony's face was chalk white, his eyes wide with a terror I had never seen. Tiffany. Tiffany was shaking. Her expensive coat was half off her shoulder. Her hair was a mess. She looked like a cornered animal. I turned the deadbolt. A loud, satisfying clack. I opened the door. They nearly fell inside. Anthony stumbled, catching himself on the doorframe. Tiffany pushed past him, her eyes scanning my small living room like she was looking for someone else for Kendrick, for a whole team of lawyers. "What did you do?" Anthony gasped, breathing hard. "What did you do?" Tiffany rounded on me. Her face was red, her makeup streaked. "You," she hissed. "You did this. You have no right." "No right," I said. My voice was calm. It was quiet. The quiet in the room was a strange contrast to their shouting. "I have no right to what Tiffany—" "To our money!" she screamed, taking a step toward me. "That is our money. That is our house. You can't just freeze it. A judge. You called a judge. You senile old fool, you've ruined us." "I don't think I'm the one who did the ruining," I said, my voice never rising. Anthony finally found his words. He was trembling. "Dad, this is insane. I called the bank. They said our accounts are frozen, all of them. The HELOC, our checking account, even Tiffany's personal account. They said something about criminal fraud, Dad. What did you tell them? You have to call them back. You have to tell them it was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I asked. I looked from my son's terrified face to Tiffany's furious one. "What part was a misunderstanding, Anthony? The part where you haven't paid your share of the mortgage in 6 months, or the part where you took out a $50,000 loan against my equity without my permission?" Anthony recoiled as if I had slapped him. How did you— "You think I'm stupid?" I said, my voice flat. "You both did. You thought I was just an old man, a financial drain, easy to push aside." "You are!" Tiffany shrieked. "You are a drain. This is our life. You had no right to interfere. That money was— it was for renovations. We were going to pay it back." "Renovations?" I said. I almost laughed. "Renovations? You mean like the $22,000 renovation on your American Express, or the $18,000 remodel on your Capital One, or the $14,000 repair on your Chase Sapphire? You mean those renovations?" Tiffany's face went from red to a ghostly sick white. She stopped breathing. She stared at me. Anthony, confused, looked at her. What is he talking about? What American Express, Tiffany?" "He's lying," she spat, her eyes darting between us. He's delusional. He's making it up." "Am I?" I said. "Am I making up the Gucci? The trips to Vegas? The dinners I couldn't afford on my best day? Am I making up the $55,000 in secret debt you've been hiding from your own husband?" Anthony turned on her, his voice a low, horrified whisper. "Tiffany, what is he talking about? $55,000? He's lying, Anthony," she screamed. "He's trying to tear us apart. Look at him." "He's a bitter, jealous old man. He's angry we didn't invite him for Christmas, so he's making up these filthy lies." "Lies," I repeated. I walked over to my small desk. On it was a single manila folder, the one Zoe had given me. I had made copies. This was the original. "You're right, Anthony," I said, not looking at them. "I am bitter. I'm bitter that I gave you $300,000, and in return you told me there was no room for me in my own house." I turned around, holding the folder. "And you're right, Tiffany. I am jealous. I'm jealous of your lawyer, Collins West and Harding. Very expensive, very aggressive. They give excellent advice." Tiffany's face, it wasn't just white, it was bloodless. She looked for the first time truly and utterly terrified. She knew what I was holding. What is that?" Anthony asked, his eyes on the folder. "This," I said. "This is your wife's exit plan, son. You see, Anthony, you were just the first part of the plan, the emotional abandonment part." I opened the folder. I took out the first page, the strategy memo. "This," I said, "is a letter from your wife's divorce attorney." I threw it on the floor right at Anthony's feet. He froze. He stared at the paper. at the gold-embossed letterhead. He didn't move. "Divorce," he whispered. He looked at Tiffany. "Tiffany, you hired a divorce lawyer. He's lying," she shrieked, but her voice was thin, desperate. It's a forgery. He made it up." "Did I make this up too?" I said. I threw down the next page. The Cayman Islands bank statement. A $49,000 transfer. Your exit fund, I believe they called it. You know, the $50,000 you stole from my trust. Anthony was shaking his eyes wide, unblinking. "Cayman Islands. And this," I said, my voice cold as the grave. "This is my favorite part." I threw down the last piece of paper. The one-way flight confirmation. St. Bart's to London, 2 days after Christmas. A little trip you weren't planning to tell Anthony about. Were you, Tiffany? Anthony finally looked up. He looked at his wife. The woman he had chosen over me. The woman he had allowed to humiliate his own father. "Tiffany," he whispered. You were leaving me. You were running." The silence in the room was absolute. Tiffany stared at the papers on the floor, her entire brilliant sociopathic plan exposed. She looked at me. Her eyes were no longer angry. They were just dead. She knew. It was over. Then she looked at Anthony, and she smiled, a small contemptuous sneer. "Of course I was leaving you," she spat. "You're weak. You're a pathetic, spineless mama's boy. I was going to leave you with the debt and the house and your stupid, interfering old father, and I would have gotten away with it too, if it weren't for him." Anthony just stood there, his mouth open. The sound he made wasn't a word. It was a noise. A single broken animal sound of pure agony, the sound of a man's entire world, his entire identity being vaporized in an instant. He sank to his knees. He didn't even look at her. He just stared at the papers on the floor, at the proof of his own execution. "You," I said to Tiffany, my voice now the only sound, "your accounts are frozen. Your lawyer by now has fired you as a client, and tomorrow a process server will be at your door with a notice of a forced sale on the house. You have no money, you have no lawyer, and you have nowhere to run." She looked at me, her chest heaving. She had nothing left to lose. With a scream of pure animal rage, she lunged, not at me, at Anthony. She launched herself at him, her hands clawed, aiming for his face. You did this. You were too weak to control him." I moved. Faster than I thought a 69-year-old man could. I grabbed her by the arm, my carpenter's grip like a steel vise. I spun her around and threw her bodily toward the door. "Get out," I said. She stumbled, catching herself on the doorframe. "Get out of my house!" She looked at me, her eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. She looked at Anthony, who was still on his knees, sobbing. She straightened her expensive coat. She smoothed her hair. And with a final contemptuous sniff, she turned and walked out of the open door, her heels clicking down the hallway until she was gone. The door was still open. The cold night air poured in. It was just me and my son, kneeling on the floor, in the ruins. The meeting was not held at my apartment. It was not held at their house. Kendrick Turner had insisted on neutral professional ground. We convened 2 days later in the main conference room of his law firm. It was a cold, silent room dominated by a 20-foot mahogany table polished to a mirror shine. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed a gray, unforgiving Atlanta skyline. The only sound was the faint hiss of the air conditioning. There were no family photos here, no warmth, just leather glass and steel. Kendrick and I sat on one side of the table. We had arrived early. Our papers were in a single, neat stack in front of him. I wore my best suit, the one I had worn to Cynthia's funeral. I was calm. I was ready. The door opened. Tiffany walked in. This was not the screaming, out-of-control woman who had been at my apartment. She had tried to put herself back together. She wore a severe black pantsuit, her hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch the skin over her cheekbones. She looked brittle, exhausted, but her eyes were two chips of pure, cold hatred. She was not alone, but she was no longer with Collins West and Harding. The man beside her was young, nervous, and carrying a worn-out briefcase. He was a low-cost, court-appointed lawyer, and he looked like he would rather be anywhere else on earth. He looked like a man who knew he was being paid to oversee a drowning. They sat down on the opposite side of the table. Tiffany did not look at me. She stared at a spot on the wall just past my head. The door opened one last time. Anthony shuffled in. He was alone. He looked gone. His face was gray, covered in a 2-day stubble. His expensive shirt was wrinkled, untucked. His eyes were vacant, bloodshot. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Tiffany. He looked at the floor. He didn't even come to the table. He just slumped into one of the leather chairs against the wall in the corner, as far away from both of us as he could get. He was a ghost. He was the collateral damage sitting in the ruins of his own life. Kendrick Turner let the silence stretch out heavy and suffocating. He let them sit. He let them feel the weight of the room. Finally, Kendrick cleared his throat. The sound was like a gavel. "We are here," he began, his voice deep and formal, "to finalize the terms of the surrender." Kendrick Turner did not yell. He did not raise his voice. He spoke in a cold, measured, clinical tone, as if he were a surgeon describing a tumor he was about to remove. "We are here," he began, his voice deep and formal, "to finalize the terms of the surrender. This is not a negotiation. This is not a discussion. This is a presentation of facts followed by a list of non-negotiable demands." He looked at Tiffany's young, nervous lawyer. "Counselor, I suggest you take notes, though I will be providing you with a full watermarked copy of all evidence presented for your client's records." He reached for the single, neat stack of papers in front of him. "Fact number 1, he said, sliding a document across the table. It was the HELOC statement from Wells Fargo. "The asset. On June 4th of this year, your client, Ms. Vaughn, and her husband, Anthony Vaughn, originated a home equity line of credit with a limit of $50,000 secured against the property in Alpharetta." He paused, letting that sink in. "As you are now aware," he continued, "my client, the Vaughn Family Trust, is the majority equity partner in that property, having provided the $300,000 down payment. This line of credit was opened by leveraging an asset that did not belong to them without the knowledge or written consent of the trustee, Mr. Julius Vaughn. This action constitutes bank fraud." Tiffany's lawyer swallowed his Adam's apple, bobbing. He scribbled on his legal pad. "Fact number 2, Kendrick said, sliding another set of papers across the table. "The motive. This stack was thicker. It was the copies of the credit card statements I had photographed from the recycling bin. We have here," Kendrick said, tapping the top page, "an American Express statement addressed solely to Ms. Tiffany Vaughn with a balance of $22,450. We also have a Capital One statement balance $18,100 and a Chase Sapphire balance $14,600, a combined secret personal debt of over $55,000 hidden from her husband." Anthony slumped in the corner, flinched, but didn't look up. "You will note," Kendrick continued, his voice devoid of emotion, "the charges. A $2,800 charge to Gucci, a $4,200 charge at the Aria Resort in Las Vegas, $650 at St. Elmo Steakhouse. This is not marital debt. This is a separate life. A life counselor that your client was financing by illegally draining the equity from my client's investment. The $50,000 HELOC was not for renovations. It was an emergency fund to service her secret catastrophic personal debt." Tiffany's lawyer looked at his client. She was staring at the table, her face as white as a sheet of paper. "Which brings us," Kendrick said, "to fact number 3, the conspiracy." He picked up the crown jewel, the memo from Collins West and Harding. "This," he said, "is a strategy memo from your client's former legal counsel, a firm, I must note, that has already formally withdrawn their representation as of 2 days ago, citing client fraud. I believe you'll find this fascinating." He did not slide this one across. He read from it, his voice clear and cutting in the silent room. "Step 1, establish irreconcilable differences." And I quote, "Your husband's attachment to his father, Julius Vaughn, serves as a perfect narrative for emotional abandonment. The Christmas ultimatum is a crucial first step." He looked up. The entire conflict, the event that began this, was a manufactured pretext for a divorce filing. He looked back down. "Step 2, secure liquid assets prior to filing." And I quote, "The home equity line of credit, in the amount of $50,000, is the perfect vehicle." We strongly advise you transfer the full remaining balance to your private non-joint account before your departure for St. Bart's. This will be your exit fund." Anthony made a small choking sound from the corner. "And my personal favorite," Kendrick said, "step 5, the payoff. And I quote, 'By ceasing all payments, the mortgage will default on or around December 1st. This will and must happen. The default will trigger a pre-foreclosure action, directed at all parties on the note, including your father-in-law. The bank's claim will effectively tie up your father-in-law's trust in litigation for years. In the ensuing chaos, you will be long gone with the $50,000 in liquid cash. Your husband, Anthony White, will be left to face the foreclosure and all joint consumer debts." He let the words hang in the air. Tiffany's lawyer had stopped writing. He was just staring, his mouth slightly open. He looked horrified. He was a man who had brought a speeding ticket to a murder trial. "She wasn't just planning to divorce her husband," Kendrick summarized. "She was planning to burn the entire asset to the ground to cover her escape, leaving my client and her husband to fight the bank and each other in the ashes." "And finally," Kendrick said, "fact number 4, the escape plan." He slid the last 2 documents across the table. A bank statement from the Cayman Islands showing a successful wire transfer of $49,000. Her exit fund, an account which I'm happy to report has been frozen by court order. And a one-way flight confirmation from St. Bart's to London, 2 days after Christmas. She had no intention of ever returning. Kendrick folded his hands. The presentation was over. "So to summarize, counselor," he said, looking at the young lawyer, "your client is guilty of wire fraud, bank fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. She has been caught red-handed with all evidence meticulously documented. Her escape plan has failed. Her exit fund is frozen. She has no legal representation of merit. And she is, as of this moment, facing a criminal referral to both the Fulton County District Attorney and the Internal Revenue Service." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "This is in short a checkmate. Your client is ruined. The only question left is how completely." Kendrick's voice echoed in the heavy silence. "This is in short a checkmate." Tiffany's young lawyer, who looked like he was fresh out of school, visibly swallowed. He had been scribbling nonsense on his legal pad, but his pen had stopped. He shuffled his papers as if the answer might be hidden in them. "Mr. Turner," he began, his voice thin and reedy, This is clearly a deeply unfortunate and complex family dispute." Kendrick just stared at him. He didn't blink. "My client," the lawyer continued, gaining a false sense of courage, "disputes these interpretations. The HELOC was a misunderstanding. She believed she had at the very least implicit permission from her husband to manage their joint assets. The credit card debt, that is a personal matter between a husband and a wife. And this memo from her former counsel," he waved a hand at it as if to dismiss it, "is a privileged document taken out of context, clearly inadmissible." "Inadmissible," Kendrick interrupted, and his voice was so sharp the young lawyer flinched. "Counselor, that document is not privileged. It is evidence of a crime. It is a blueprint for a conspiracy, and you are at this very moment in the presence of the victim of that conspiracy. Save your inadmissibility arguments for a judge if you're truly foolish enough to let it get that far." The lawyer flushed. My client was under duress. She was financially naive and was acting on bad advice. She had no intent to defraud anyone." "No intent?" Kendrick let out a short, dry laugh. "No intent. She accidentally hired the most aggressive divorce firm in Atlanta. She accidentally set up an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. She accidentally booked a one-way ticket to London. She accidentally stole $50,000. That is a remarkable string of accidents, counselor." "This is punitive," the lawyer said, his voice rising in desperation. "You've frozen her assets. You're demanding a forced sale of the house. This isn't justice. This is retaliation. It's retaliation because of a simple Christmas invitation." He had said the wrong thing. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. Kendrick Turner leaned forward, planting both of his hands flat on the polished mahogany table. The friendly, gravelly-voiced old man was gone. This was a different man. "Counselor," Kendrick said, his voice a low, dangerous growl, You will not speak about Christmas in this room. You will not call this retaliation. You will sit there and you will listen. This meeting is not about my client's hurt feelings. It is about your client's felonies." The lawyer recoiled. I object to that term. This is a civil matter. It is a contractual dispute." "A civil matter." Kendrick stood up slowly. He walked around the table until he was standing directly behind the young lawyer, who was forced to crane his neck to look up at him. "Let's be perfectly crystal clear about where we are," Kendrick said, his voice resonating through the room. "Your client, Ms. Tiffany Vaughn, walked into a federally insured bank. She signed her name on a loan application for $50,000. She did this by knowingly and with clear forethought leveraging an asset that did not belong to her, an asset held in a legal trust. That, counselor, is not a civil matter. That is bank fraud, a federal offense." He took a step. "Your client," he continued, then instructed that bank to wire those funds, the proceeds of her crime, into her personal account, and from there she wired them again to an unreportable offshore account in the Cayman Islands. That is not a family dispute. That is wire fraud and money laundering. More felonies. He took another step until he was standing beside Tiffany. She was rigid, staring at her hands, which were clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. "She did all of this," Kendrick said, his voice dropping, "while in active conspiracy with her lawyers, as documented in this memo, to defraud all other parties on the note, to flee the jurisdiction, to leave my client, Mr. Vaughn, and her own husband, Mr. Vaughn," he gestured to Anthony in the corner, "to hold the bag on a catastrophic default, a foreclosure, and over $55,000 in secret debt." He leaned down, his face close to the young lawyer's. "These are not civil matters. These are crimes. These are the kinds of crimes that the Fulton County District Attorney and the United States Attorney and the Internal Revenue Service build careers on." He put his hands on the back of the lawyer's chair. "So, counselor," Kendrick said, his voice now almost a whisper, "you have two choices. You can sit here and you can keep talking about mediation and context. You can keep billing your client for this performance. Or we can all just sit here quietly for the next 5 minutes while I place a call to my very good friend, Assistant District Attorney Ben Hill. And after I'm done with Ben, I'll be placing a call to the Criminal Investigation Division of the IRS. They have a particular passionate interest in undeclared offshore accounts." He paused. "So you tell me, counselor, you're her lawyer. You give her the advice. How do you think your client, Ms. Tiffany Vaughn, is going to look?" "In an orange jumpsuit." That was the word. The final one. Tiffany made a sound. It wasn't a cry. It was a sharp, strangled gasp, as if she had been punched in the stomach. The last thread of her composure, her arrogance, her entire false identity snapped. She crumpled. It was not a graceful collapse. She folded in on herself, her shoulders shaking, her head dropping into her hands. A single dry, racking sob tore through the silence of the room. It was the sound of a con artist finally totally and completely realizing the con was over. She was trapped. She was not going to St. Bart's. She was not going to London. In the corner, Anthony, who had been a ghost, let out a low moan. He slid forward in his chair, putting his head between his knees as if he were trying to disappear. "I just sat there. I watched the woman who had tried to destroy me and the son who had let her both break in the same instant." Kendrick Turner stood tall. He looked at the young lawyer, who was staring at his weeping client completely out of his depth. "The agreement," Kendrick said, his voice returning to a normal professional tone as he walked back to his seat, "is on the table. You will sign it, or I will make those calls. You have 10 minutes. Kendrick Turner let the sound of Tiffany's ragged sobs fill the room for one long, heavy minute. He let her feel the full weight of her collapse. He let her young lawyer stare, helpless. Then Kendrick sat down. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single 5-page document. It was bound in a simple dark blue cover. He slid it across the polished mahogany table. It stopped directly in front of Tiffany's lawyer. "This," Kendrick said, his voice now calm and professional, "is the settlement agreement. It is non-negotiable. You will advise your client to sign it, today, now, or my calls to the district attorney and the IRS will be made before you reach the elevator." The young lawyer, his hands shaking, slightly opened the cover. Kendrick did not let him read it in silence. He narrated the terms as if engraving them on a headstone. "1," he said, Ms. Tiffany Vaughn and Mr. Anthony Vaughn will consent to an immediate voluntary forced sale of the property at 4409B Alpharetta. An independent receiver chosen by my firm will manage the sale to ensure maximum immediate value." Tiffany choked on a sob but didn't look up. 2. Kendrick continued. "The distribution of proceeds. From the sale, the first $350,000 will be paid directly to the Vaughn Family Trust. This represents Mr. Vaughn's original $300,000 investment plus the $50,000 fraudulently removed via the home equity line of credit. The trust will be made whole first, no one else. 3. Ms. Tiffany Vaughn will sign today a full and irrevocable quitclaim deed forfeiting any and all rights, title and interest to the property and any remaining proceeds from the sale. She will walk away with nothing. 4. The $49,000 currently frozen in the Cayman Islands offshore account will be immediately repatriated and forfeited to the Vaughn Family Trust as partial damages for legal fees and conspiracy." The young lawyer looked up, his face pale. That's punitive. You're taking everything." "I'm not finished," Kendrick said, his voice like ice. 5. All unsecured marital and personal debts, including but not limited to the $55,000 in credit card balances we have documented, will become the sole and exclusive responsibility of Mr. Anthony Vaughn. Ms. Vaughn will be indemnified from these specific debts." I looked at Anthony in the corner. He didn't even react. It was just one more shovel of dirt on his grave. This was Tiffany's only win. She was escaping her secret debt, but only by legally burying her husband under it. "And finally, 6, Kendrick said. "The condition. In exchange for Ms. Vaughn's full, immediate, and silent compliance with every term in this document, my client, Mr. Vaughn, will agree not to forward the criminal complaint to any state or federal prosecutor. He will allow her to walk away, not free, but out of prison." He leaned back. "That is the deal. You are trading a lifetime of debt and humiliation for a prison sentence. I suggest you take it." The young lawyer read the document, his eyes scanning the pages. He knew it was ironclad. He knew he had no room to move. He put the document down and leaned over to his client. "Tiffany," he whispered, "you have no choice. He has you, on all of it. The bank fraud, the wire fraud. It's all here. You must sign this." Tiffany's sobs had subsided into shallow, shuddering breaths. She didn't move. "Tiffany," her lawyer hissed more firmly, "he is offering you a way out. Do you understand me? He is offering to let you walk away when he could have you put in jail for 10 years. Sign the paper." Slowly, as if moving underwater. Tiffany raised her head. Her face was a ruin. Her eyes were red, swollen, and empty. The hatred was gone. The arrogance was gone. All that was left was the hollowed-out shell of a failed con artist. Her lawyer pushed the document in front of her and offered her a pen. Her hand trembled. She looked at me just once across the vast, polished table. Her eyes were no longer defiant. They were just empty. She had lost. Utterly. She took the pen. She uncapped it. And on the last page, with a shaky, spidery signature that looked nothing like her name, she signed it. She signed away the house. She signed away the $50,000. She signed away her entire fraudulent life. The lawyer then took the document and walked over to the corner where Anthony was still slumped in his chair, his head in his hands. "Mr. Vaughn," the lawyer said gently, you have to sign as well." Anthony didn't move. "Anthony," I said. It was the first time I had spoken in the meeting. My voice cut through his fog. He slowly lifted his head. His eyes were blank dead. "Anthony." I said, my voice not unkind, but not kind either. It was just firm. "Sign the paper. It's the last thing you have to do." He looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. He looked at the paper. He looked at Tiffany, his wife, the woman who had executed him. He took the pen. He signed his name without reading a word. The deal was done. Tiffany's lawyer, visibly relieved, gathered his client. He helped her to her feet. She didn't look back. She walked out of the conference room a ghost. She was a free woman, but she was a free woman with nothing. No money, no home, no future. It was just me, and Kendrick, and my son still sitting in the corner, a broken man. The aftermath was quick, and it was brutal. Kendrick Turner, true to his word, had been a surgeon. The forced sale of the Alpharetta house was completed in less than 3 weeks. A cash-buy investor eager for a deal snapped it up. From the proceeds, my trust was paid back first, $350,000. My $300,000 and the $50,000 she had stolen. It was wired directly into my new secure account at Citizens Trust Bank. Tiffany, as agreed, signed the quitclaim deed. She was present at the closing, a silent, hollow-eyed ghost. She signed the papers and, as far as I know, walked out of the law office and straight into a taxi. She was gone. She didn't say goodbye to Anthony. She just vanished. The last I heard, her lawyer had confirmed she had used the small amount of cash she had left to fly back to her parents in Ohio, a free woman with absolutely nothing. Anthony was left with the wreckage. He was now solely responsible for the $55,000 in secret credit card debt. He had to declare bankruptcy. His leased BMW was repossessed. He lost his high-paying tech job, they said, due to distractions. He moved out of the $1 million home I had paid for and into a tiny furnished studio apartment in a rough part of town, the kind of place with peeling paint and sirens at night. I did not see him. I did not call him. The silence was absolute. And then it was Christmas Day. My small apartment was quiet. I had a small turkey breast roasting in the oven. It smelled good, but I wasn't hungry. I was just, existing. It was the first Christmas of my entire life that I was truly, completely alone. I looked at the photo of Cynthia. "Well, honey," I whispered, "it's a mess." At 2 p.m, there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I thought for a second it might be Anthony, but the knock was too soft. I opened the door. Zoe stood there, my granddaughter. She was wearing a thin jacket, and next to her on the floor was a large, worn-out suitcase and her school backpack. Her face was pale, and her eyes, Cynthia's eyes, were red from crying. She looked up at me, her lip trembling. He's in a bad place, Grandpa," she whispered. "The new apartment, it's not good. He just sits in the dark. He hasn't left the room in 2 days. He told me I should be with you." I looked at this child, this 16-year-old girl, the only innocent soul in this entire disaster. She looked at my small, clean apartment, then back at me. Her voice was so quiet I almost couldn't hear it. "He said, 'There's no room for me there,'" she whispered. "He said I deserve better. Grandpa, can I stay with you? Please, I don't have anywhere else to go." I didn't say anything. I just stepped back and I opened the door wider. I reached down my calloused carpenter's hand, gripping the handle of her heavy suitcase. I lifted it and I brought it inside. "Go wash your hands," I said, my voice thick. "Dinner's almost ready." A few days after Christmas, my phone rang. An unknown number. I answered. "Dad." It was Anthony. His voice was... I had never heard it before. It was thin, cracked, and completely hollowed out. All the arrogance, all the weakness, all the excuses, they were gone. All that was left was the sound of a man who had hit the concrete at the bottom of the well. I just... He started. Then he choked. I heard him take a ragged breath. I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm sorry. I knew she was... I was a coward. I let her do it. I'm so sorry." I was silent. I listened. I don't expect you to forgive me," he whispered. I don't. I just had to say it." I stood by my window looking at the street. "Sorry doesn't pay the bills, Anthony," I said, my voice firm. "Sorry doesn't fix what you broke." "I know," he choked. "I know. I don't know what to do." I sighed. "A friend of mine," I said, "Leroy, who runs that custom cabinet workshop over in Decatur, he needs a new bookkeeper. His last one was stealing from him. It's not a big job. The pay is crap. You'll be working in a dusty office the size of a closet. And Leroy, he's a hard man. He won't tolerate any nonsense." There was a long silence on the other end. "I start Monday," I said. "Be there, 7 a.m. Don't be late. And Anthony, you mess this up. You're on your own." I didn't wait for him to thank me. I just hung up. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a single rough plank of wood thrown into the hole he was in. It was up to him to climb out. My name is Julius Vaughn. I am 69 years old. I got my money back. But that's not what I won. I won my dignity back. I got my granddaughter. My relationship with Anthony, it's not fixed. It's broken, maybe forever. But it's different. He shows up to that job every single day. He's starting to pay off the mountain of debt Tiffany left him. We don't talk much. But when we do for the first time in 20 years, it's the truth. It's a foundation of rubble, but it's real. A week into January, Zoe and I finally bought a small late Christmas tree. We set it up in my living room. I went to my closet and I brought out the heavy abandoned gift, the drafting table. I watched her open it. Her eyes lit up for the first time in months. A real, genuine smile. It's perfect, Grandpa," she said. We sat there, just the two of us, decorating our little tree with her new table set up by the window catching the winter light. It wasn't the Christmas I had ever imagined, but it was the first one that felt true in a very long time. The greatest lesson from this story is that true family is not built on blood but on mutual respect. Generosity without boundaries is not kindness, it is self-destruction. It teaches us that you must never allow your value to be determined by those who only see you as a resource to be drained. Sometimes the hardest act of love is not to give more but to find the courage to say no, to set a firm boundary and to protect your own dignity, even if it means tearing down a rotten foundation to build something new and honest. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? And what city are you listening from? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.